they're viewing on YouTube, and I just need to figure out where we're going to see any chats from them, if it's going to come back into our Streamyard chat.
There's like 120 people who have RSVP'd, so it's you brought the second biggest crowd we've ever had, Mala. So this is impressive. And the only other reason we bought that other crowd is when I went to one of the banks and I literally went to the managers and said, they have to come here. And then we like forced half the bank to actually come there. So this could be the biggest session we've had. So which is great.
I had a session at Investec that was close to 100 in person, but they always. Their catering is awesome. So
oh my gosh, what we've
all these bachelors show up with the empty
like riblets, like ribs, little short ribs. We've even had shrimp on a stick and smoked salmon, like these. I don't know what they think that they eat. Eventually, we said to them, "Listen, pizza and beer. They're like pedigree dogs. You can't feed them this because they don't even know what to do."
And Conan, because you mentioned, sorry.
No, go for it.
I said because you mentioned about the North Indian food that you get in UK, because there's, I think, just one or two food items which they have made popular. So when we talk about North India, it's not just one food. So we have so many cuisines, even in North India. And just one is, I think you must be knowing about the hot curry or the chicken tikka, but there is so much more to Indian food, even to North Indian food. And then we talk about the different parts of India. We have so many cuisines and so many flavors.
Oh, I can just imagine. I mean, a country of over 1 billion people, and you see India on the map, but you don't realize that there's so many languages and so many different cultures, and they're so old. And for a long time, there wasn't a lot of movement between them. So there's lots of stuff that developed locally and have survived. And in spite of the English, we all live in spite of the English.
We have a lot of culinary nuances here, but it's I think it's unique.
So in South Africa, we have a big Malayan influence, because in the early the Indians came here as basically as slaves, and I think in the early 19th century. But
indented servants.
But in the 200 years up to then, they were mostly Malayan slaves. So we have a lot of Malayan influence in our cooking. But a lot of these people were who came here had been slaves to these families who came from the Netherlands, but they were they fled France in the late 1500s, and they were there for 2 generations. So there's all this French influence, this Malayan influence, the Dutch influence. To try and stay thin in this country is a huge challenge, because these people cook with sugar and with syrup.
That is true.
They will make anything sweet, and it's a challenge to stay thin in South Africa. And then obviously there's the local influence as well, which brings another nuance. So it's literally a world in one country. So you can come here and you can experience all kinds of experiences and adventures, and you can go to the desert, and you can go into the bush, and you can go into the rainforest, and you can visit all kinds of beaches, and so there are an immense amount of things to do. So I can promise you, if you come and visit us, we will figure out ways to treat you, and
Sure,
to
it would be a
scare
pleasure.
you, and but we've got no lions walking in the street. Well, not where I live. There was a town near the Kruger Park that had a lion escape not too long ago. And it was big news, and everybody was on edge. So I just want to see. There is the live chat. So there is a live chat. I'm just going to open that up here to see if I can spot the live chat. Come on.
Mala, we're new to Streamyard. I have tried to convince Cornel not to use it because my experience to it has been not good over African and Indian streaming. I even once had a bad experience with Streamyard where I closed my browser window. And then if you don't know, I just killed I had to redial into the session. So Streamyard and me go way back. But we'll see the connectivity around that. But it's so far so good.
But we've been using StreamYard for quite a long time at JetBrains, and we are happy with both the
No. I'm not thinking about the technology. I'm actually thinking about the internet connectivity between the different areas there. Because I've done a few sessions in non-US or non-Euro-centric zones, and it just stutters. It loses connectivity. But maybe it will be easier between the two of our points.
Okay.
I mean, it depends on where they have edge nodes to deal with the streams. So I just want to see how many people are online. Only a few so far. So we'll keep talking about interesting things about our countries. So where in India?
Sorry. This says that we're already live, so we're already streaming to YouTube.
Yes, we are. So hence why I've not sworn or said anything dismal or picked my nose in any way. So that's why I have done that. But we can pause it and then I can pick my nose. No, we don't want
it. I'm sorry, Cornel, I interrupted you. You were saying something.
No, I was asking, where in India are you from? Where did you grow up and where do you live now?
So I'm based in New Delhi. I was born and brought up here, the same city.
Okay. And how many people live in New Delhi?
How many people do we have in New Delhi? Loads of us. I'll have to look up the count, but there are loads of us.
Yeah, it must be a huge amount. Interesting. And people don't realize, I mean, the Johannesburg metropolitan area is basically, I mean, you could see it as one huge city because it's built
10 million people.
About 60 kilometers in multiple directions. And it's about 10 million people that live here. And it's high above sea level.
No water. No, absolutely nothing.
Yes, because they came here for the gold. So whereas most cities are built near water, we went like, no, we're after the gold. So that's why this this place is here and we live here. We have to pump our water from a few hundred kilometers away. And we've been lucky because it's a pretty decent river. We've had some close calls when the Vaal Dam was a bit low. But yes, it's a interesting city with nowadays people from all over Africa and people from all over the world. I believe, Marla, I think, tell us a little bit. I see that you are involved in some huge community work. I'd love to know a little bit about that.
Are you talking about the Java user group?
No, I can't remember it, but I saw in your bio, so there's some organization that you started to help uplifting
Are you
goals. Is it a part of the user group or is it a separate thing?
Are you, do you mean the Women Who Code Delhi chapter that
Yes.
Okay, so I co-lead the Women Who Code Delhi chapter. We have chapters in multiple cities across countries. So I think the last time I was looking at the numbers, it's more than 20 countries that the group is active in, and more than 70 cities, I think. And that works quite like the Java user groups work, and we are independent to do our own things. And unlike the Java user groups, there is more support from the main organization, the Women Who Code global organization that we have. So in a way, works like the Java user group, but as I said, more support from the Women Who Code main organization that we have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now
And
how many girls or women are involved?
Loads of us. We have different counts on different channels on Meetup. We are close to 3,000 members, and we have a Slack channel on which we have another different count. Twitter, we have different following. So if I add up all of those numbers, I would say 6 to 7,000 members. But of course, we would have some
Some
overlapping
overlap.
of the number. Yes. And now we are running one of the events, which is mentorship program, in which we have some leaders who choose to be mentors, and then we publish what they have been doing, and then we are inviting applications from others who would like to be the mentees. So that would
Mm-hmm.
be a month-long program in which the mentees would interact with the mentors, and then they would have a couple of activities for them. And at the end of the program, they would share the experience and how it all went. So that's really interesting, because we're doing, I think that's the fourth season that we are doing of the same mentee and mentorship mentor program. So this is
Mm-hmm.
mentorship 4.0, I guess.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, that's wonderful.
Mm.
Our Java community, so on our meetup, I think we're about 2,300 now. But obviously, it's interesting that the attendance on the virtual meetups haven't come close to what we had in person.
Right.
We had one in-person meetup where we had only one person, but that was unfortunate. There was an evening of, there was just suddenly there were
We're never
riots
going to
and
live that
violence
down.
in the city
We're
in the city center,
we're never going
and
to live that down.
everybody just went home. And this one guy, he basically worked in the building where we had the meetup. So he just walked over and came. He was unaware of the upheaval. So we were three organizers and the presenter from Europe, and one attendee. So he left with a JetBrains coupon and a handful of T-shirts and two huge boxes of pizza. So,
Wow.
but so usually in person we were around, I'd say, rarely below 20, and the average was probably about 30, 40, and there was a few times when it went up to 80 or maybe 100. And but we moved between different venues, and it would usually depend on the venue. So that's one of the challenges, because people don't they don't want to travel too far. Now, I'm not asking them to travel, and I think they just get to the end of the day and they're just exhausted because
Yes.
this working from home is different. Somebody
No,
said it
the
very well.
the secret is to have tactical naps. Okay, so I've got the naps down. Okay, you need good
Yes.
noise cancelling headphones, and not the ones that go over your ears, the ones that go in your ears, because then you can actually put your head down and you can roll over. Right. Okay. Then on the noise cancelling headphones, then you need 200 to 300 hertz white noise, and you drown out everything. And it also kind of takes your whole brain down a notch, though. And then you also need to coax your family into say that you're doing a power nap, 20 to 30 minutes. I have one every day, and you feel like 100% better.
Oh, that's great. You must write that up. I would put it
No,
in
it's
a
just our
tweet.
secret. It is our secret. Tell no one. Okay.
Well,
It's literally, I'm gonna
broadcast
survive
this.
forever. Oh yeah. So this is broadcast. If you're listening over here, power nap for all of you.
Okay, so I think I mean we're now 8 minutes past 6, so 7 minutes is supposed to be the socially acceptable time to be late. So everybody after this is going to miss out. So I'm going to start by welcoming our audience, and I'm quickly going to spin the wheel twice, and then the second spin is
I think we've lost Kunio.
Yes.
We've got you. See, this is what happens, Mala. One of the person drop off there.
Okay. It did actually spin in the background, so I'm closing that. Come on. Go away, go away. Where did my
Kunio now.
spin
We
wheel
chat.
go
He's my
now?
friend. He chats in the background with me all the time.
No, it just disappeared completely, so I'm going to have to find it again. And see if I can open it. The new window. Let me type in wheel and see if it's wheel of names. If it comes up with the names we had. If it doesn't, I have to quickly find them. No, there they are. So there's our names. So I'm going to spin it again. Now,
Yeah, that's not
let's see where
distracting.
it stops.
Whoa, that's like spinning colors. I think I'm gonna.
Okay, and our lucky winner is
Franz
David Schmidt. I have your email address, so I will be sending you a
This is the most excitement I've had in like weeks.
the voucher. And now that the pictures are a bit bigger, you can see there's a maybe unfamiliar face. So we have our guest for the evening is Mala Gupta. She's a developer advocate with JetBrains, and she's nearing the end of her day because she lives in India, and that's why we moved it a bit earlier. And if this time works for everybody, we'd love to know, because then we can keep our meetups at this time. But I'm not going to waste a lot of time. I can speak for a long time about Mala's bio by just reading everything that she has achieved and done. And I would rather let her share with you what she thinks is pertinent. And she's going to talk to us about the latest features in Java 17 and how IntelliJ makes those features available. So I am going to put her screen on the screen, and I'm going to take away.
Thanks, Conil and Rory. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to present with your Java group user today. So as Conil mentioned, I am going to talk about Java 17 language features. What do you think? Having a new feature every 6 months, how does that work for you? Is it exciting, overwhelming, or both? I would say it is exciting because it helps to use the new features to improve our applications, but it can be overwhelming to keep pace with all the changes. Hi everyone, my name is Mala Gupta. I would introduce myself at length towards the end of the session because if you think what I would be talking about today makes sense, then probably you'd be more interested in the introduction. And today I'm going to talk about the Java 17 language features, what these features are, why you need them, and how you can use them in your applications. And I'll also demonstrate how IntelliJ IDEA can help lower the cognitive load which is associated with using new Java features. So, what do you mean by cognitive load? It refers to the amount of instructions or information that you have in your working memory, which is limited. The working memory is limited. So if you try to overload it with a lot of instructions or information, then your productivity might drop. Let me explain it using an example. Assume this is a method which is supposed to calculate the damage that you are doing to the planet, which depends on the object parameter that you pass to it. Let's assume that this is how you code this method. A set of if-else statements, nothing fancy here. Now, at this point of time, IntelliJ IDEA can suggest that you can replace if with switch. Now, this doesn't look quite harmful, so you'll say, okay, let me give it a go, and you select this option. And this is what happens. Congratulations, you just managed to use pattern matching for switch, which is in Java 17, even without knowing that this feature existed or about knowing about the syntax. So these are the benefits that IntelliJ IDEA offers to you. Now, we are not talking about using the next shiny language feature or any feature for just for the sake of using it. Why would we want to use a new feature? If it helps to make our code better in terms of the reduced number of errors, or if it makes the code more readable or more writable. Let me as I mentioned, we are bridging the gap between knowing a feature and knowing how to use it, because we all go to conferences or we read a book and we get to know about the new features in a language technology so many places, but there is a gap when it comes to how you would like to use that feature in your own code. And this is how IntelliJ IDEA can help by giving you the hints and how to exactly going and changing it. So it kind of works as a consultant too. And the before and the after images are super important when we talk about the transformation. So on the left, you can see the code which existed before you used pattern matching for switch. And on the right is the code after the transformation. As visible, the code on the left is a bit longer. It's a bit difficult to navigate to find out what happens if a certain use case is not met. But on the right, it's much more easier. And it also takes care of a certain reducing certain errors by like what happens if null is passed or is the default. And I would demonstrate how that works as we work through the session. Now, as I mentioned, IntelliJ IDEA not only helps you to get to work with the new features, it also reduces the cognitive load when we talk about getting started with using a new version. the project wizard that you have in IntelliJ IDEA lets you download and configure a JDK without bothering about which JDK vendor to choose from. And it could be done at the click of a button so that you don't really have to work with the boring things. We know these configuration things are important, but at the same time, boring. So I think you are going to save a lot of time if you're going to use IntelliJ IDEA to work with the new Java 17 language features. So what are you going to invest all that time in? I would suggest that you invest the time, spend it with the people who matter the most to you, like your family and your friends. So this is my family, my husband, and our brave daughters. Now, let me get started with the first feature that I want to talk about, which is pattern matching for Switch, which is a preview language feature. What that essentially means is that feature is complete, but it is not permanent in the language until now. Unlike an API, parts of which can be deprecated at a later point, language features can never be deprecated. So if you have any feedback regarding the feature that we're talking about, make sure you connect with the developers at Oracle by using their mailing list, and you can share your feedback. Some prerequisite before we deep dive into the live demonstrations. Pattern matching is a big topic which is being delivered in Java in batches. It started with pattern matching for instance of. We're talking about pattern matching for Switch as preview feature in Java 17 and 18. And we are also looking at deconstructing arrays and records. I was hoping JEP 408 would become part of Java 18, but no, we'll have to wait longer. I know a lot of slides, but we'll get to the demo part soon. So quickly, let's talk about, to understand how to work with pattern matching of Switch, we'll quickly go through what do we mean by pattern matching in general, how it applies to the instance of operator, and how has the Switch statements enhanced in the recent past, with the Switch expressions. So let's get started with working with pattern matching in general. If you look up the definition, you would see that pattern matching means applying a set of checking a sequence of items or tokens and checking whether they conform to a particular pattern. Let's say, I know it's again confusing, so let's talk about another example. Consider this statement. Assume that you are out and you are looking for living or non-living objects which you think are animal. So what would you find? Probably some or all of these. Imagine you were thinking about animals with yellow or black stripes, then probably you would have to change the pattern that you would apply to the objects that you see. And in this case, you would see these animals. Of course, if you were only thinking about tiger or not a snake, then of course you will have to add more if statements or conditions or modify the pattern accordingly. Now, after talking about pattern matching in general, let's talk about how pattern matching applies to the instance of operator. So it became as a standard language feature in Java 16, and it enhances the Java language by applying the pattern matching to the instance of operator so that it can work with a test pattern. So as we know, instance of operator can be used to check whether an object is of certain type, but I can also add another variable, which is the pattern variable, sorry. There's so many words which are repeated that it becomes a tongue twister. Sorry about that. So enhancing instance of operator using type test patterns. Oh my God, this really is becoming a tongue twister now. So let me hop on to my IDE for a demonstration, and I would be using the latest version of IntelliJ IDEA, which is 2021. 2022.1, which is in the early access program. The stable version is 2021.3. Of course, you can download both of them from the website. Now let me hop on to my IDE and let's think, let's work with an example where I would be using the instance of operator without using pattern matching. So how would you output the value of, let's say, this method parameter in uppercase? First of all, I need to check if this object is of type string, because we're talking about changing it to uppercase, string, and then I would create a local variable, and I think there's a lag because of the streaming. Yes. And I create a local variable and then I cast the object parameter to string, and I can output this value. This is a lot of lag. Okay. And this is how I would use the instance of operator. But now, as you can see, what would I want to do after checking if the object is an instance of string? The next obvious thing would be to use a member of this variable. And this brings me to this line, which is casting, but is of course redundant. So what I can do is I can use the pattern matching. For instance, I can invoke, all the shortcuts that I would be using in the demonstration, those would flash towards the bottom of my screen with a green background so that you know which shortcuts that I'm using, shortcuts or features, because I would not be able to address them separately. So when I use invoke Alt and Enter, Option Enter on a Mac system, I can use pattern matching for instance of. And this has, this is a pattern variable. This is assigned a value after this test is true. And of course, there are multiple other things which can be done. This only applies to the if part. It cannot be accessed outside the if part, but those are other things which we kind of don't need for the flow that we are in now. So if you are thinking, how does that help? Because a lot of complaints that I heard about using pattern matching for instance of is that it just takes away one line of code. If I go back and, it takes away just one line of code. That is not true, because I could use pattern matching for instance of, and then I could change my code, refactor it in multiple ways. Because let me work with this method and let me show you how, by using pattern matching for instance of, I can refactor this code to make it more readable and concise. So I am following the clues by IntelliJ IDEA. This has a yellow background which highlights it. When I invoke Alt and Enter, I can replace this with a pattern variable. Now the line between the two if statements has been removed. Now I can merge this if statement with this if statement. How do I know that? Because I have been doing that a lot of time. And also I can see a light bulb, which I can view the suggestions by, this is funny. I viewing, this is funny. I'm viewing the suggestions on my extended screen. So let me change this to just one screen. Okay, I hope I can see that now. Yes, I can see that now, Cornel. If you now that I don't have my extended screen, if you cannot see things, you'll have to hop on and let me know because I can view only one screen now. Now let me use this. What just happened? Okay, I have to use the merge nested ifs, and this works. Now I can replace the loop with collection.remove if. I'm just following the clues by IntelliJ IDEA at present, and I can also inline this variable. And this is how I can modify the code. Of course, a lot of developers do not like to inline the first line of code, and this probably makes it more concise, which is okay. So I just showed how removing just one line of code with pattern matching for instance of can really help you making your code concise. Now, let me go back to my demonstration and let's talk about how switch statements have been enhanced in the recent past with switch expressions and why would you want to use switch expressions. So let me again go to my IDE and see what do we have here. Okay, so this is example code. Net damage to planet is one of the methods which you would see a lot of times in your production code. And what this is doing now is depending on the method parameter that you pass to it, which is of type single-use plastic, you are calculating again the damage which is being done to the planet. Simple code again. As a Java developer, I do not see a lot of issues. But if you look at the code closely, whenever you see repetition, that's the place where you would need to improve the code because I see the assignment of a variable here, again here. These are the places where the code is being repeated, and these are the places where the bugs can hide. So let's first of all go to this its test class and see if this is working correctly. Now I already have a couple of tests which are written for it. Now I'm running the test and let's see if all of these are working fine. Yes, they are. Now let me go back to this class. And what do you think would happen if I just remove this break statement? I just deleted the break statement. And let's see if all the tests work as expected. So you would see that one of the test fails, which is the actual value should be 20, but the expected value is 10, but the actual value is 20. And how does that happen? When you remove the break statement, the control falls to the next case label, which of course we had the test, so we could detect it. But what happens if we don't have the relevant test? So that's a bug that can creep in. So in this case, what if I replace it with a switch expression? Now this is no longer a statement, this is an expression because this is returning a value, unlike the switch statement, which only executes and doesn't return a value. Of course, I could inline this variable as well. And the other benefits of switch expressions is what if I remove this line of code? Now this does not compile because we're talking about exhaustive checking of the values that are passed to the switch expression. Switch expression must return a value no matter what argument you pass to it. In this case, it's an enum and it has 4 values which can be passed to this enum single-use plastic, the variable here. But if you are not taking care of all the values, then either you have to insert a default clause, default case label, or you have to add the missing value here. Now, this is how it can be done. Of course, we can also have multiple case labels in the same statement if the values are same. Let's say if this is 10, I could also merge the values. Now, in this case, because we are not bound by taking care of the missing break statements, the code becomes less error prone. And of course, because it's concise, it's easier to read, write, maintain, a lot of benefits. Now, there are also a lot of benefits which, again, are not relevant to the flow of the main topic that we are covering, which is pattern matching for switch. Now, let me go back to, yes, and this one point which I would like to highlight, which is comparing switch statements with switch expressions and the colon syntax versus the arrow syntax. Now, when I was demonstrating the code, I changed the colon syntax to an arrow syntax. That doesn't mean that you cannot use either of them as in statements or expressions. When we talk about a switch statement, we talk about a set of code which executes but which would not return a value. On the other hand, when we talk about an expression, it is bound to return a value. In this case, I am using a return keyword with the switch keyword. So it has to return the value. Everything, this code snippet must return a value. Similarly, in this case, I am using the return keyword, the return keyword with a switch block. And if I'm not using an arrow syntax, I should use another keyword to return the value. And in this case, it is yield. I could also just execute a set of statements without returning a value using a colon syntax or an arrow syntax. In this case, I am not returning a value. So this is not used as a switch expression, but it is used as a switch statement. I know I'm using the term switch expression statement a lot of time, but once you work with a couple of examples, the difference would be more easier to get a hang of or to understand. Now, let's coming on to the main topic, which is pattern matching for switch. And let me again go to the IDE. And yes, in this case, I would like to talk about how pattern matching for switch is enhancing, again, the Java language and the switch operator construct by adding patterns to it. You just saw how instance of operator can be used with a type test pattern. The switch statements were enhanced to extend it to switch expressions. Now, both of that and some extra things are coming to pattern matching for switch. And there are a lot of things that I want to talk about in this case. Before I do that, because if I just talk, that would become quite boring. So let me hop on to an example. And where is the example? Okay. So this is the example that I want to. So this is the example that I showed to in the beginning of the presentation. Now I am using, okay. So as let me again invoke the context actions by using Alt and Enter, and I can replace the switch with the if statement with switch expression. I can also view how the code would look before I choose it. I can inline this variable, and this becomes much more concise. Now, another important point that I would like you to focus on is Now I am switching on an object, and with the earlier switch statements, we could only switch on integer values or enums or strings. But now you can switch on the selector pattern has been enhanced, extended, and you can pass any kind of object to it, which is interesting. The other point is how you would handle the null values. What happens if with the previous switch statement, you were only passing it the integer values or the strings or the enums, even though the later were objects, you were not passing a lot of objects to it. I guess that was one of the reasons why null was not being included as a case label. But when you can pass all the objects, all kinds of objects to pattern matching for switch, to the selector pattern, handling null is an important point I will get. What happens if there is no null label here? You would probably add an annotation to it. Let's say not null annotation. So this modifies so in this case, this becomes redundant because now you no longer have the need to test for the null value. But let's say we don't have it here. What are the other ways in which you could do? You could say, I'm talking about how you would have done it before the existence of pattern matching for switch. You say if object is equal to null, then probably you say, return, let's say -1. But now, of course, we don't need these extra lines of code. So again, the code becomes concise. It's easier to read and write. So that's how you can handle a null. Of course, you cannot have null as the first parameter because then the code would not compile. Now, let me again go back to my presentation. And there's another point that I want to highlight, how the reading of the code is affected when you use pattern matching for switch versus using multiple long if-else statements. This is how the code would read when you use multiple if-else statements. You have a condition based on true, you take some action. If it's false, you take another set of action, which in this case is another set of if-else statements. Now compare it to the switch statement, switch expression. Though the logic which has been used in both these is similar, the way you read one set is quite different from how you read or understand the other set. So I personally believe that it really helps to read the code. If you replace your multiple if statements with the switch expressions. And again, as I mentioned, there's nothing like having a before image and an after image of the transformation. So this is how the reading of the code would change when you use if statements versus the switch expressions. As I showed how you can work with an arrow syntax or a colon syntax, both with switch expressions and statements, the same applies when you pass objects to as the selector pattern. So it's the same thing. The only difference is the values that you are passing here. Now an object can be passed. Now let me go back to this. There's another thing that I want to show. Let's say you have get another method and you are passing it a value of type object. And now I can switch on an object, and I can also, so this was In this method, I showed how you could convert an existing if statement to switch expression. How about you are getting started with writing switch expression? You can use the object name, and you can use a postfix operator, which is switch, and that would generate the code for you. So you can say case, in this case, let's say pollution, and you have a value, and in this case, let me use return with it so that I can do some value here. Then I have a case label. Let me take care of null, and I have the default case label as well. So I could use the postfix operator to quickly create a switch, path matching for switch, and the case labels would prompt me what values I can enter. Now, what else can I show you? Of course, the pattern dominance. Um, if, as a Java developer, you might have worked with the catch blocks, what happens if you try to catch exception of the base class before a specific class? Of course, the code doesn't compile because it can the code which follows this for the specific class, it becomes unreachable. So a similar thing happens here. In this case, air pollution is extends the class pollution. So what if I have a case label which tries to address the case pollution? Let's see. I just want to return a value here. Now, in this case, I can see that this label is dominated by the preceding label. So this doesn't work. So this is a compilation error. Now, what else? What happens if okay, I can also add more conditions. If we go back to the example of when we're trying to understand if an object is a striped animal with yellow and black stripes. So instead of having, let's say, another set of if statements in this part of the of your code, let me just, that's an EAP. So, of course, EAP has a lot of errors as well. Where was I? It's difficult to get back to the flow, right? Yes, I was talking about adding more conditions. What happens if you want to compare something else? So instead of having something like if air pollution dot, okay, so I could say if, let me, air pollution that get damage is, let's say, get greater than 10, then I want to return, let's say, 100. This works okay, I guess. Why do we have this? Okay, this is funny. Let me go back to my initial code and let me just add a value here. It damage, or I could use another method. I could say get AQI is greater than 100. So I just added another condition, which is another dimension to pattern matching for switch. And This can again help to make your code more concise. Now, what if you want to look for similar um, patterns in your code base, and you want to replace all those if statements with switch statements? In this case, you can run an inspection with the name, and I could search for if switch that would give me the exact name of the inspection that I want to run. And now I can select the scope where I want to search. Of course, I can just look for the open files or all the files. And this is something that you need to take care of, because a lot of times developers run the inspection and then they complain that the IDE is not detecting multiple if occurrences of the if statement. So if the condition branches is 3 or more, then you would see the values here. Of course, this is configurable and you can change it. So let me see if I could find places I could use, if I could convert this. So let me go to my editor pane to make it more visible and see what I can do here. As you can see, this is a kind of method that you would see a lot of time in your code base, where you have multiple long chain of if else statements. Let's see how I can replace it and how does it make my code readable. So this is how you can improve the readability of your code by replacing long chains of if else statements with switch expressions. And because you know that the IDE would be covering your refactoring, so you don't really have to be bothered about breaking the code. Of course, having test is another good way to make sure that all the changes that you do, they still have the code return the same value as they were doing earlier. So this is how pattern matching for switch can help you write code which is concise, readable, writable, and easier to maintain. Now I want to go to the next topic, which is the sealed classes. Now the syntax of this feature, so this is not a preview feature, this is a final feature in Java 17, so good to be used in your production code. The syntax of this feature allows you to define code which is define, control, and restrict which classes can extend your classes, or which interfaces can be implemented by your classes. So that's the syntax part. But why would you want to do so? The goal is to allow you to define hierarchies in your application that align better to your business goals, and of course, in a declarative manner. And we are also talking about decoupling accessibility from extensibility, because as Java developer, if this was before the sealed classes, if I could see a class, I could extend the class. So if I could access it, I could extend it. No, but I don't want to do that, because I have been doing a lot of workarounds to prevent that, like making the constructor of my class private so that no other classes could extend it, or to make it package private so that it remains inside, it has the visibility inside the package. Not anymore. Let me give you an example. Let's assume that you are working on an application for gardeners, which talks about working with plants of a certain type. Let's say the plants which grow in your garden, like a climber or a shrub or a herb. and you do not want this application to work with any other kind of plant, let's say the one that grows in a desert or in a water body like lotus or things like that, how would you make sure that the hierarchy that you have in your application conforms to just a certain certain set of subtypes, and you do not have another developer coming in which who can pollute the number of subclasses that your base class can have. Let's see if seal classes can help. So this is a quick diagram to kind of, so this is a happy developer. I would say this is me, and who's happy that she can use seed classes to control the hierarchies that align with the business use case. And in the demonstration, I would also show you how you no longer need to handle the subclasses that do not exist. Remember the line of code which says system.out.println, the code control should not reach here, something of that sort. So let me go to my IDE and see what do we have here. Okay, now this is, let's say, the class that I mentioned. And this is my base class. Let's say I have another couple of classes, and how do I generate all the code? Oh my God. This is funny. I just miss what was. Okay, so let me create the other classes. I have class herb, which extends plant, right? And I have class shrub, which extends plant. And let me create another class, which is climber, which extends plant. And now the last class which I want to create is cucumber, which extends the climber. Now, these are the set of classes that okay, a spelling mistake. What happened to the spelling? I think that was okay. Okay, now that was okay. This is funny. Yes. Now assume, let's go, let's talk about the application that I was talking about. Now this is your class gardener, and we have a method process in which we want to process the method parameter, which is this, which is passed to the process method. And let's code this using our favorite if-else statement. So if I say if plant is an instance of, let's start with shrub, I want to assign a value of how can I process shrub. I can say prune shrub and I can pass plant to it. And then I say else if I say if plant is an instance of what else do I have? I have herb, and now I want to call the method cell herb, passing plant to it. Now, what else do I want to do? Now, let's talk about climber, right? And what do I want to do with it? Let me call the method so climber passing plant to it. the last condition is if plant is an instance of, let's say, cucumber, and then I want to call the method, which is the method, okay, harvest cucumber, and then I want to pass plant to it. Okay, now what is the problem? Cucumber, remove if, okay, I don't want to do that now. Okay. Now imagine if you do not assign a value here to this local variable. What happens is this variable would not have been initialized. And what is it that we normally do? We add another else statement where we would say this value is equal to some random value. And then we would have something like this statement. Yes, it's mandatory to have it in capital letters because that's how we make it sound loud. This statement should never print, right? So this is how we climber. What happened to climber? Okay. This should be cucumber, and this should be right, and this should be climber, and right, because I was trying to address the specific class, the derived class before the base class. So that's why I was getting that error. Now, this is how I would define the process method. Now, what is the problem here? Of course, as I mentioned, so this is the problem here. What can I do? In this case, if I try to replace it with switch, the default value tries to assign certain value, but I don't want to do that. I know that I have just 4 subclasses and I want to restrict defining the code that I have for these 4 subclasses. You can compare this situation to something like you go back home and your spouse says, "Oh dear, so what did you get as a gift for our third child?" And knowing that you have only 2 kids, you say, "But I don't have the third child." But we don't have the third child. And the spouse says, "No, but just in case, if that happens, what would you like to give the child?" Excuse me? That's not happening. That's insane. So, this is what has been happening because we, as developers, we have been forced to code for something that doesn't exist. Of course, the language could not enforce this until now. But what happens, let's say, if I change this to a sealed class, I go to the class definition and I say seal class. And now, if you see, all of the derived classes have been assigned another modifier. In this case, it is non-sealed. It could be non-sealed, final, or sealed. So let me change this to final, and let it this one be non-sealed. Non-sealed essentially means that you are not further sealing the derived class and you are letting it decide which all classes it wants to have as its derived classes. And in the case of non-sealed classes, if it has further derived classes, then the non-sealed class doesn't has to define that in its declaration. But if I have a sealed class, then I need to define its derived classes in the declaration like we have now. So let me say, okay, in this case, there's another difference. I did not have the permits clause, because all the subclasses, they are in the same source file, but if they are in different source files, then I would need the permits clause, which comes here and not there. So I have herb, I have shrub, I have climber here. And in this case, as I said, I could have the permits clause or I could not, because this is in the same source file. But let me just add it so that we know. Extends plant. No. What am I doing wrong? This extends plant. Okay. I'm sorry, probably that's because of the live coding. So the climber defines this as the class which it permits. Now I could remove this case here. Insert the default branch. Okay, now this is happening because this class is not abstract. If I make this abstract, I know that I cannot pass any instances of the class plant itself. But if I make it as non-abstract, then it would require me to define a default clause. So let me make this as abstract. Now, of course, if what is happening here might not have been initialized. Why? We had all the code in place. This is non-sealed. What if I make it final? Does that make you happy now? No, it doesn't. Sealed class cucumber. This is funny. What is happening here? Variable might not have been initialized. So what do I do? Add default. Why? I'll have to look this up because this was working fine. I'll probably have to look that up because we're running out of time. That's funny. This is shrub, herb, cucumber, climber. We are taking care of all the sealed classes and the hierarchy. Herb, shrub, cucumber, and climber. What if I just delete these, and if I delete these, is that okay now? What if I don't? No, that's not working. So probably something else. I'm missing something, which I'll have to look up again. Probably I'm missing little something. Now let me go back to the class that I mentioned. Of course, I'm sorry, the demo did not go as planned. So we talked about the sealed classes. There is, you can also write the sealed interfaces using the same. You can define sealed interfaces. Again, you can define classes that are allowed to extend or implement the interface. You can define other interfaces which are allowed to extend the classes, the interface, sorry. And if there is another class or an interface that tries to extend or implement it, if you do not add it to the permits clause, it will not compile. And this is a quick Now, should I leave it as an exercise or should I show that to you? Okay, let me show one and I would let you explore the other. So if you look up the definition of the interface constant DESC from the Java API, you would see that it is a sealed interface. And class also has, you can search for these methods. Let me go to the definition. This is again a class from the Java API. If I find get permitted subclasses, so this is how the Java API already has sealed classes and interfaces. You can look for this method, which is already in the Java API. As I mentioned, it is no longer a preview feature and can be used in your production code. The other quick example is when you make your classes and interfaces sealed, this is how you can avoid the code that you can avoid, because until now, if you're not using sealed interface, you can cast an object of an unrelated class to that interface. Like in this example, erasable is an interface, and even though a writing device, which is here, it okay, in this case, it is using the sealed type, so it can define what is being permitted. But if you take out the sealed information from this class and interfaces, then this would work okay. So this is another way of working with code so that you don't run into problems which you might have been running into earlier. Now, what else do I have to show you? I think I've talked about the sealed classes in the Java API, and I think that is it. Yes. So all the features, the demonstration that I talked about in the session can be accessed using this blog, and an article in Java Magazine was recently published on sealed classes. So if you want to explore more about the sealed classes, you can refer to that article as well. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure to present. And if there are any questions, I would be good to take now.
Marla, I've actually asked the audience to post any questions. We haven't had any, so I'm going to ask them to just say yes or no if they are actually using Java 17 in any capacity, because I know that a lot of our audience may not be in a position to, or the freedom to make that choice, so they might be doing it in their spare time. Some people are lucky in they're in an environment that realizes the value because there's even just performance gain. It's already worthwhile, but there are little things here and there, and they're probably waiting for somebody else to say, no, our stuff is fine, and then they'll start looking. But we haven't had any questions come through yet. So Rory, what has been your experience on the Java 17 side in terms of uptake?
Well, I work for a small startup out of Seattle. I don't know if you've heard about them, Microsoft. And we're pushing the latest and greatest with the Microsoft OpenJDK. And one of the things that we are starting to roll out is the Java 17 JDK, because it's an LTE version and it is supported. And it's one of the key differentials that we're trying to identify to people and say to them. But it's not about upgrading from Java 16 to 17. because people aren't doing that. They're going all the way from 11, some of them even from 8, all the way through to 17. And then they're going, there literally are like 500 different changes from all of these services. Oh, and what is this modules thing that we're looking at? And why aren't my libraries doing that though? They literally have like, oh, there's a little light on my car and it says oil. I think I'm going to change it like after like 4 years. So that's what I equate it to. You have to change you should have changed it often, the oil in your car, not just when you had to and to get the support. So we're experiencing a lot of people who are having issues that are that could have been avoidable. That really could have been avoidable if they had upgraded their instances. And their Docker containers are just throw it away, just because they're so under maintained that the Docker container is just you have to start again. So that's my experience on that. So my recommendation is upgrade often. Upgrade always, and choose a distribution where your vendor is really supported there. So if you do run into issues, you can say, "Hey, please help. I need a copy of your Docker instance or your container instance that you've actually certified." And that's something also that people don't realize that you need to get. JDK is great and everything. Pop it on a Docker container, and then just all hell breaks loose because no one has actually gone through the checks for those Docker instances.
I think, some of the key things, the word that's popped up this year is supply chain security, which everybody's like, what's that? Well, basically, because you have a Docker container running of an app and runtime support and a stack of libraries that come from different places, any of them are vulnerable to bugs or attacks. And the whole idea about supply chain security is to automate the addressing of those issues. Now, I think one of the things that's going to be great moving forward is because we're now going to a 2-year release cadence, which I think will make this jump from 11 to 17 that people are experiencing less jarring, because now it will be to 19 and to smaller increments. And but don't skip the one in the middle. Just keep an eye on what's going. So you have to be aware of what's coming down the line, because things are moving ahead at a rate which we're not used to. People sat on 8 for so long, and 8 has been solid. Its performance has been great. In fact, I have a whole set of demos I did over the years that invariably include benchmarks, and I run them across the board. And it was only with about 15 where I got stuff that started beating the version 8 stuff. And now with 17, it's across the board.
Yeah, so that's true also. But the problem is that your 8 didn't know that Docker had a certain, and containers had a certain level of memory.
Yes.
So it just kind of said...
Then obviously it's a different ballgame. But not everybody's even in containers. Because a lot of people are still running stuff that's on-premise in a VM, or even just in the cloud on a VM, because they had a fight with Kubernetes and they lost. And,
everyone loses with Kubernetes. Everyone.
Yes, no, it's the bane of our existence. When my analogy is that no, Kubernetes is not. It's not a train you get on to go somewhere. It's a bunch of Lego blocks, and you're going to step on them in the dark. And that is...
I know that pain. I know that Lego pain. And a plug. Okay, nothing comes close to a plug, standing on a plug in the dark. But we're constantly seeing the industry move towards making people's lives easier and pushing Kubernetes out. And then they bring in their JDK instances and they pop it onto a container and they say, oh, wow, I need low-level support and low-level control. And the problems with that low-level control is that they haven't upgraded to 17. The only reason that they need that low-level control because they're running some old dodgy libraries that, their brother's uncle's friend, gave them, and they've hacked it. But if they had just kept on upgrading and then just investing, they wouldn't have to run, JSON, whatever, that does some kind of JAXB, marshalling on the side that they've had to intercept. So upgrade early, and I'm looking forward to Panama. My biggest thing is when virtual threads come. Can you imagine what the discussion that we're going to have now over, yes, you have to upgrade, but no, don't use threads. Use virtual threads. Like, what? You're still using threads? No.
We'll get Marla back to come and show us. Because she's the one who stays on top of the latest.
That's going to be fun. Panama is going to be fun.
Panama and Loom is.
Bring you back once a year at least.
So the virtual threads are coming in Loom.
Yes. Isn't Panama the project that's addressing the memory layout issues?
Yes. So it's about accessing the foreign memory and also accessing. So that's another interesting project because we have been talking about Python developers coding a lot of training models, and then Java developers could just sneak in and through Panama and just get all the information that all the Python developers have done all the hard work, and we can kind of access all that using Panama. So that would be interesting.
Yes. No, and if you start digging into what. Graal is just starting and it's already delivering value, but it's providing a platform that is going to be incredible because it's going to make that kind of foreign access literally native and performant. And now, if the reason to not be on the JVM is shrinking. To the extent that, well, unless it's something teeny, very, very small, you'll probably get the best out of running the JVM because there's more than, where are we now? 25, 20, we're approaching 30 years now of Java. I think next year it's going to be 30 years, and it's stronger than ever. And people wishing it away, no, it's not going to go away. And it's not your grandfather's Java anymore either. No, I'm excited about the future of Java, and I must say, it's wonderful to see you fire up IntelliJ and you get these hints and you follow the hint and you're like, what just happened? And you undo, you redo. Okay, that's what happened. Because it's remarkable. It's literally like having somebody pairing with you that was part of the JVM team. And I get the same experience in Kotlin. It's a great learning experience because you take the Java code and you paste it into a Kotlin file, and then it's Kotlin, and then you start following the hints, and you're like, oh, this now it's just taking away everything that I had to imagine doesn't exist to understand my code. So no, it's a fantastic tool. I've learned I work on the release. I've stepped on the Legos of the EAP. So, but thank you to the audience for joining us. There's a link that you can complete a feedback form, And at the bottom, there's a section where you can put in your details if you want to be part of the next draw. Marla, thank you so much for your time. And we are definitely going to make this at least an annual thing. Maybe even after every bump. What's that, Marla? Come and tell us. Because everybody knows, you go read what Marla wrote or watch the video she did, because she's covering the latest features. And for those of you who don't know, just go and jump on YouTube and search for Marla Gupta, and you'll see some wonderful presentations of all the features. So if you're still on 8 and you don't know what's happened, you can follow the history all the way through, and she will be guiding you. So thank you very much, Marla. Any last words from you?
Thank you so much, Cornel and Rory. It was a pleasure to present today and to talk with you. Absolutely great conversation, and I would definitely love to come back and talk about the new features of Java, because as I said, we have new features every 6 months. So I would be having new content to talk every 6 months. So it would.
Wonderful. And we have an annual conference, and hopefully, if we're lucky, it's in person this year. And when the call for papers come out, I'm going to spam your mailbox with info, and then you can fight amongst the other JetBrains advocates to see who's getting the trip to Africa. Because I know Ari has also said, no, he wants to come and visit. At least you're not fighting with Trish anymore, so you're probably.
I never had to fight with her. So we were such great team members. So we never had to fight with each other for anything.
But that would be if they sent 2 of you to Africa, then there's no competition. But we would love to have you visit, and thank you very much for your time, and thank you everybody for joining us. It's the first time that we've used the new Streamyard platform. I'm still trying to figure out the glitches. I've got a hunch some of them came from my desktop, but I hope everybody had a good viewing experience. Thank you very much, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.